I didn't plan on starting a war with an HOA. I just wanted quiet, space, and room to breathe. When I bought the 50 acres, it was intentional. Outside the HOA. Outside the noise. Outside the constant letters, fines, and invented rules. The land was raw, peaceful, and legally mine. No shared roads, no common areas, no community standards. Just trees, dirt, and a narrow gravel access road that had existed long before anyone thought about subdivisions. The first week after closing, I noticed tire tracks near the tree line. Nothing dramatic, just enough to tell me someone had been using the land. Neighbors, I assumed. People get used to shortcuts. I put up a small sign. Private property, NO, through traffic. It was polite, clear, and temporary. Or so I thought. 3 days later, I met Karen. She didn't introduce herself. She introduced the HOA. She stood at the edge of my land, arms crossed, lips tight, staring at the sign like it had personally offended her. She told me I couldn't block their access. I asked who they were. She said residents. I asked for paperwork. She laughed. According to her, the road had always been used by the HOA. According to me, I had the deed. I calmly explained that the land was not part of the association. Her tone shifted. She warned me about fines, violations, and consequences. That was the moment I realized this wasn't confusion. It was entitlement. Over the next week, the situation escalated. HOA flyers appeared on my fence. Someone removed the sign. Someone else drove around it. I replaced it with a locked steel gate. Simple. Legal. Boring. That gate broke something in Karen. She showed up again, this time with a clipboard, a phone camera, and an audience. She accused me of landlocking the community. I reminded her that I bought land, not obligations. She threatened legal action. I invited her to try. What Karen didn't know yet was that this gate wasn't a bluff. It was the beginning of the end of her control. I had spent months reviewing easements, surveys, and county maps. There was no recorded access. No grandfathered right. No handshake deal. Just assumptions. The HOA had been cutting across land they never owned because no one ever stopped them. Until now. When Karen called the sheriff, she expected backup. What arrived instead was a deputy who read the sign, checked the plat, and told her to leave. The look on her face was pure disbelief. Authority had failed her. That night, I locked the gate and slept better than I had in years. Because for the first time, the boundary was real. If you want to hear how Karen escalated, what legal threat finally crossed the line, and how this locked gate changed everything, make sure you subscribe now so you don't miss Section 2. Because what happened next shocked the entire HOA, exposed years of abuse, and proved that knowing your rights is sometimes the most powerful tool you have. This story isn't just about land. It is about boundaries, confidence, and the moment someone finally says no. The gate stayed shut, the phones kept ringing, and the pressure only increased. But so did my resolve. I had paid for peace, and I was done apologizing for owning it. The next confrontation would prove exactly how far Karen was willing to go, and how badly she misjudged the situation, the law, and me completely. What happens next changes everything you thought you knew about HOAs, power, and property rights forever. Now breathe deeply. The morning after the gate went up, the HOA went quiet. No emails. No flyers. No Karen. That silence didn't feel like surrender, it felt like planning. By noon, I understood why. A pickup truck rolled up to the gate, stopped, reversed, then parked sideways like it owned the place. The driver didn't get out. He just sat there, engine running, blocking my own access road from the inside. That was the first real escalation. I walked out, phone recording, and asked him to move. He said he was waiting for authorization. From who? The HOA president. I told him he was trespassing. He shrugged. I called the non-emergency line. When the deputy arrived, the story changed fast. Suddenly, the driver claimed he was confused and thought this was a shared road. The deputy asked for proof. There was none. Another warning. Another red face. Another truck backing away. By the end of the week, I had cameras up, Not hidden ones. Big, obvious ones. Karen noticed immediately. She sent a certified letter accusing me of harassment, surveillance, and obstruction of community access. I read it twice, laughed once, and handed it to my attorney. He smiled and said, "Good. Now we have a paper trail." What the HOA didn't realize was how much documentation I already had. Old aerial photos, county maintenance records, emails from previous landowners confirming no easement was ever granted. Every shortcut, every assumption, every year they'd crossed land they didn't own, it was all coming into focus. Karen didn't back down. She doubled down. She organized a community walkthrough where residents showed up at my locked gate, phones out, acting like they were being oppressed. One woman cried on camera. Another man yelled about property taxes. Karen narrated the whole thing like a documentary villain origin story. That footage went straight to the county. 2 days later, I received a call from zoning enforcement, not to warn me, but to ask questions. Serious ones. About how long the HOA had been routing traffic through protected land. About runoff. About whether any grading or paving had occurred without permits. I answered honestly. I provided evidence. I forwarded emails. The pressure flipped instantly. Karen stopped emailing me and started emailing lawyers. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, not with residents, with consultants. Because once zoning gets involved, fines don't come in hundreds. They come in tens of thousands. Then came the threat that crossed the line. A notice claiming the HOA would exercise eminent domain through municipal cooperation. That's when my attorney stopped being polite. He sent a response citing statutes, case law, and one uncomfortable truth. HOAs don't get eminent domain. Governments do. And only with due process. Karen had been bluffing with words she didn't understand. The bluff cost her credibility. Residents started asking questions. Why was there no recorded easement? Why were they being told to trespass? Why had dues increased the same year legal fees exploded? Karen blamed me publicly. Privately, she panicked. One night, someone tried to cut the lock. Cameras caught it. Plates were visible. The sheriff recognized the vehicle from the HOA parking lot. Charges were discussed. Suddenly, Karen wanted mediation. I agreed, not because I had to, but because it forced everything into the open. At the table, maps were spread out. Deeds were read aloud. Silence stretched. The mediator asked Karen one simple question. Do you have any legal right to that road? She didn't answer. Because the truth was now undeniable. The gate wasn't just blocking access, it was exposing years of overreach. And the HOA was finally realizing that this fight was never about convenience. It was about control. And in the next section, you'll see exactly how that control collapsed. When the county made its move, the residents turned, and Karen lost the one thing she valued more than access: authority. The county didn't rush in with sirens or press releases. That's not how real consequences arrive. They came quietly, through letters with official seals and meeting requests labeled mandatory. The first one went to the HOA board. The second went to the developer who originally built the access road. The third? That one landed directly on Karen's desk, certified, signature required. By then, the neighborhood rumor mill was in full meltdown mode. Residents started noticing survey flags along the road they'd used for years. Small orange markers appeared near drainage ditches and along the edge of my land. County trucks parked, not blocking anything, just observing, measuring, taking notes. Every time one of those trucks showed up, Karen's authority slipped a little more. At the next HOA meeting, she tried to regain control. She stood at the front, smiling too hard, insisting everything was procedural and temporary. But homeowners weren't buying it anymore. Someone asked why the county was investigating environmental violations. Another asked why legal fees had tripled in 6 months. A third asked the question Karen feared most. If this isn't our land, why did you tell us it was? She deflected. She blamed previous boards. She blamed misfiled records.
She blamed me.
That strategy backfired immediately. One homeowner, retired, meticulous, and very done with HOA nonsense, stood up and said he'd pulled county records himself. He confirmed what I'd been saying all along. No easement. No right-of-way. No shared access. Just years of unchecked assumption. The room shifted. Phones came out. Screens lit up with maps and PDFs. Karen lost the room in under 5 minutes. Then the county report dropped. It outlined unpermitted grading, improper runoff redirection, and environmental impact caused by routing traffic through protected acreage. The kicker? The HOA was listed as the responsible party. Not the residents. Not me. The board. Specifically, the board that approved and enforced the access route. Karen's name was all over it. Fines were mentioned. So were remediation costs. And potential personal liability if it was proven that the board knowingly ignored property boundaries. That's when the tone changed from defiant to desperate. Karen reached out privately for the first time. No threats. No demands. Just, can we talk? I agreed, on record, with attorneys present. At that meeting, she finally admitted what everyone else already knew. She'd assumed the land was communal because it always had been. She never checked. Never verified. And once the gate went up, she panicked. Because if she was wrong about this, what else had she been wrong about? The county answered that question for her. They ordered immediate cessation of use. No more traffic. No more footpaths. No exceptions. Temporary access permits were denied. Residents would have to reroute through a longer, legal road the developer had avoided because it cost more. The backlash was instant. Residents demanded refunds. Some demanded Karen resign. Others talked about lawsuits for misrepresentation, for increased dues, for dragging the community into a legal mess that never needed to exist. Karen tried to hold on. She scheduled another meeting. This time, barely anyone showed up. Authority doesn't vanish all at once. It leaks out when people stop believing. And then came the final blow. The county informed the HOA that remediation of the damaged land would be required. Restoration, drainage correction, environmental review, all of it at the HOA's expense, or the board members could face personal exposure. That's when Karen's emails stopped again. Because the fight was no longer about a locked gate. It was about survival of her position, her reputation, and possibly her finances. And in the next section, you'll see how the residents made their choice, how the board fractured, and how Karen learned the hard way that power built on assumption collapses the moment facts show up. By the time the county's cease and desist order became public, the neighborhood had split clean down the middle, and Karen was standing alone on one side. The HOA board emergency meeting was called on a Tuesday night. No snacks. No small talk. Just tension thick enough to feel. The board members showed up early, whispering among themselves, flipping through printed copies of the county report like it might change if they stared hard enough. Karen arrived last, shoulders tight, smile completely gone. She opened the meeting by insisting they stay unified. That lasted exactly 30 seconds. One board member asked the question everyone was thinking. Are we personally liable for this? The HOA's attorney, paid by the hour, visibly uncomfortable, didn't sugarcoat it. If the board knowingly enforced access over land they didn't own, especially after being warned, personal exposure was absolutely on the table. Insurance might not cover it. Indemnification wasn't guaranteed. That's when the finger-pointing started. Emails were read aloud. Old meeting minutes surfaced. Screenshots of Karen dismissing concerns were projected on the wall. She tried to interrupt, but no one let her. Every sentence dug the hole deeper. The narrative collapsed in real time. This wasn't a collective mistake. It was a top-down decision driven by ego and unchecked authority. Halfway through the meeting, 2 board members resigned on the spot. One of them actually said, "I didn't sign up to lose my retirement over a road." And just like that, Karen's shield was gone. Word spread fast. By morning, residents were openly furious, not at me, but at her. People realized their dues had funded legal threats, fines, and now remediation costs, all because one person refused to admit she was wrong. Yard signs went up demanding transparency. Group chats exploded. Someone started a recall petition. Karen tried damage control. She sent a mass email claiming she was misled by historical use. That email lasted about an hour before someone replied all with scanned deeds and county maps proving otherwise. After that, the HOA email server mysteriously went quiet. Then came the lawsuit threats. Several homeowners hired their own attorneys. Not to fight me, but to prepare claims against the HOA and its leadership. Property values were affected. Commutes were longer. Some residents faced refinancing issues because access routes had changed. All of that had a dollar figure attached. Karen called me again. This time, she wasn't asking to talk. She was asking to settle. She offered to pay for an easement. Not a fair one, a rushed, undermarket offer, clearly meant to save her position. I declined. Calmly, professionally, on advice of counsel. Because by then, it wasn't about money. It was about precedent. You don't get to bully first and negotiate later. The county moved forward with enforcement. Contractors began assessing the damage. Sections of the land were fenced off for restoration. Signs went up marking protected areas. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same HOA that once accused me of blocking community access was now legally barred from stepping foot on the land at all. Karen's final act was a closed-door board meeting where she proposed a special assessment, thousands per household, to cover remediation and legal exposure. That was the moment even her remaining supporters turned. The vote failed. Badly. Within a week, she resigned for personal reasons. No farewell email. No apology. Just gone. But consequences don't end with resignation. Investigations continued. Records were audited. And residents were left with a hard lesson about what happens when authority goes unchecked and assumptions replace facts. As for the gate, it stayed locked. And in the final section, I'll explain how the neighborhood rebuilt without her, how the HOA restructured, and why that locked gate became the most expensive mistake Karen ever made. After Karen stepped down, the silence she left behind was louder than any meeting she'd ever run. The HOA was suddenly leaderless, exposed, and most importantly, humble. The interim board froze all enforcement actions immediately. Every fine issued in the last 12 months went under review. Letters were sent out acknowledging administrative overreach, which is legal speak for we messed up and we know it. The county didn't slow down. Environmental inspectors finalized their report, and it wasn't pretty. Unauthorized grading. Improper drainage changes. Encroachment into protected land. Each violation came with deadlines, penalties, and mandatory remediation. Contractors moved in not to build, but to undo. Asphalt was cut. Fill dirt was hauled away. Natural flow paths were restored inch by inch. Residents watched it all happen in real time. What really changed the neighborhood wasn't the construction. It was the realization. People finally understood how close they'd come to disaster because no one had asked a simple question years earlier. Do we actually own this? The HOA's attorney was replaced. So was their management company. New bylaws were drafted with one central theme: verification before enforcement. No assumptions. No historical use nonsense. Deeds, surveys, and county confirmation became mandatory before any action touching property boundaries. And the locked gate? It became a symbol. At first, people resented it. Then they respected it. Eventually, they were grateful for it. Because the gate didn't just block access, it marked the boundary between entitlement and reality. It reminded everyone that land ownership isn't a popularity contest or a vote. It's a legal fact. A few residents approached me directly. Not with demands, not with threats, just honest conversations. Some apologized. Others asked questions. A couple even thanked me for standing my ground when no one else would have. One older homeowner said something that stuck with me. If you hadn't stopped her, she would have run us straight off a cliff. Property values stabilized once the legal cloud lifted. The refinancing issues cleared. The commute adjustments became routine. Life went on, quieter, more cautious, and far less dramatic. Karen tried to resurface months later. She ran for a position on a neighboring HOA board. Lost badly. Word travels fast in small communities, especially when court filings are public record. Authority, once broken that publicly, doesn't come back easily. As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't post signs. I didn't give interviews. I just maintained my land, honored the law, and kept the gate exactly where it was. Locked. Because the real win wasn't revenge. It was resolution. No shouting matches. No viral confrontations. No police standoffs. Just paperwork, patience, and refusing to be pushed off what was legally mine. People like Karen rely on intimidation, speed, and the assumption that no one will push back. They count on confusion, on fear, on the idea that fighting isn't worth it. Sometimes, all it takes to unravel that kind of power is one person willing to say, "Show me the deed." The valley didn't belong to the HOA. The road didn't belong to the HOA. And authority without ownership turned out to be nothing more than noise. The gate still closes every night at dusk. And every time it does, it clicks shut on a lesson that whole neighborhood won't forget.